Nothing compares to the promise I have in you. Amen.
Last week in the pen of Matthew, we watched what he has written, and we watched as Jesus died. It's what the Lord had come to do. And when he breathed his final breath, he accomplished the task that was set out for him to do. He fulfilled the plan. He did it. And now he hangs on the cross. It's just a dead body with no life in it. But have you ever wondered about the man who is writing this as we are reading it? He is a disciple of Jesus, a chosen apostle, handpicked by the Lord himself. But as Jesus hangs there, where is he? And while you're asking where he is, where are the other apostles too? We know a few things. Reading Matthew, Judas is dead. He killed himself. Matthew told us that. Peter, I'm guessing he's rattled, still maybe crying somewhere, hiding himself in shame. And John in his gospel tells about one disciple, one apostle, who is there at the cross, maybe staying close at least for a moment. He doesn't name him, just calls him the disciple whom Jesus loved. I figure it's the young apostle John. But where's Matthew? The one who writes this. Is he staying away like the other apostles, with the other apostles? Are they maybe right now in a secret room, locked away, hoping they will not be found out by the Jews? That's John 20, where they're in a room locked, fearful. Maybe they're somewhere around the cross, nearer to the city, looking over, getting a glimpse, but not too close. Maybe they want to see but not be seen. I don't know where they are. It doesn't say. But I figure their world is just turned upside down there beside themselves. And you know this. You know the feeling if someone you love dies. Death has a way of rattling you like nothing else can. Fred Craddock tells a story of being in an airport in Portland, Oregon, waiting for a plane to take him back to Atlanta. And he's talking casually with a couple he'd met. He guesses they're maybe in their 70s. They're obviously coming back from Hawaii. They're both really tan. The man still has a lei around his neck and a big straw hat on and carrying the gifts for all the grandkids. And at that moment, he falls over onto the floor. And the paramedics are called, and they're there probably in 2 minutes, he says. Just like that, they're there, but there is nothing they can do. It's over. And when that man who had hit the ground fell and hit the ground, he broke his glasses. And so Fred's having a conversation now with the woman who's still left there, and part of her words are like this: I didn't bring another pair of glasses. He had another pair, and he told me, took them out and said, take them. Remember to take the other pair of glasses, and I forgot. I left the glasses. It's the only pair of glasses, and I forgot. Now what are we going to do? She kept talking about the glasses while he is laying there on the ground dead. And he says she's in shock, of course. It's a providential way, he says, of protecting us from death until we're able to make sense out of the nonsensical. And Craddock says it happens to us, and it happened to the disciples, and I figure right now they're in shock, and maybe that's an understatement. They're not even around. Thankfully, a few others, Matthew will say, step into the void to take care of some business, and we'll get to that in a short while. I want to pick up here in Matthew 27, but I want to step back and get a running start at it just to catch us up. Does it seem to you like everybody's against Jesus? Back in the garden, his friends run for their lives. Peter gets a sense about him and follows at a distance, gets to the courtyard of the high priest, and he folds too. Denies that he even knows him when a few accusations are pointed at him. Since then, during the trial, the whole Sanhedrin's against him. Then the whole company of Roman soldiers, and then the whole crowd outside the palace, and then the whole group of onlookers at the cross. Everybody's against him. From the garden, some must have grabbed him, and at the trial, some must have lied about him. And during that whole thing, some have hit him and spit on him and mocked him mercilessly. And some had their fun, and some cried out for his death, and some are just plain cruel. And it looks like, it feels like, if you get it, that they're all hating on him. Did anybody like Jesus? Did anybody think he was innocent? Did anybody stand up for him? Did anybody have any compassion at all for him? Actually, yes. Some different individuals to different degrees. Don't leave them out. Pilate believes he's not guilty. His wife says it's basically the same thing. One criminal crucified next to him changes his mind and believes him, even wants him to save him, and he does. And right about now, a few more step out of the shadows, revealing something of themselves, showing a little bit of faith. So we'll read just now, verse 54 in chapter 27. When the centurion and those with him who were guarding Jesus saw the earthquake and all that had happened, they were terrified and exclaimed, "Surely he was the Son of God." The darkness, the cry into the heavens, the earthquake, the temple curtain torn. And right now then, an individual or a group of individuals speaks up. It looks like for the first time with somewhat of a bold statement. It says they're afraid, terrified, the NIV says. Fear is set in, push them to act, maybe react. And the conclusion they come up to is this man is special. He's different. He's unique, and that's not it at all. That's more than that. That's too soft. No, this man surely was the Son of God. I don't know how many others are talking here. I don't know how many are under the centurion's lead. I don't know the group, but I'd like to focus on the man because the others talk about him too. But this leader of men, this commander of soldiers has been watching, I'm guessing, all along, watching. And when did he start to believe? Just now? When did his faith sprout and start to grow? What led him to this moment? What led him to this conclusion, along with some others who agreed with him? I don't know. And don't you wonder, has he been here the whole time? Was he enjoying the fun back at Pilate's place? With all the other soldiers, was he taking part in that? Stripping Jesus down, dressing him up like a silly king, mocking and spitting and hitting, making him bleed while we laugh? Was he part of that? Did he hear the crowds shouting for his death, specifically for crucifixion, wanting him to suffer? Was he pushing Jesus through the crowd with the cross on his back? Was he watching him stumble and fall and pushing it onto the back of Simon? Was he participating all along, or was he just watching? Even standing at the cross, did he hear the taunts and the jabs and the verbal missiles headed toward Jesus, hitting the middle man on the cross when it must have hurt to hear it? And in response, did he hear him forgive them for what they were doing? Did he hear the tender words of Jesus' mother? Did he hear the man's heart breaking within him, seeing the parched lips crying for relief, listening to at least the words or the groans as he is dying, and watching him close his eyes and knowing that's it? At what point did he start wondering or thinking or rethinking or rephrasing what he had always imagined? Did it rattle him before, or just at this moment when the darkness covers the light of the sun and when the trustworthy solid ground beneath him starts shaking and some tombs are open and later some bodies come out walking again among men? And when he gets word from the Jewish leaders, the temple ripped from top to bottom, it's an act of God, it can't be from man. What has pushed this man to fear, and what has his fear pushed him to believe? Because the conclusion is pretty impressive for a Roman soldier. He makes his statement, the miracle surrounding the death of this man. It's an odd thing for a Roman soldier to say about a Jewish criminal that he has just helped to kill. But he understands now this is no criminal and this is no ordinary man. And even while the Jewish leaders and those who were influenced by them are killing their own countrymen, here is a Gentile, a Roman, a soldier, an outsider who just nailed him there saying, "This is the Son of God." Commentators wonder if this didn't get this man into trouble, because a Roman soldier should be saying no such thing about such a God. Understanding the ramifications of such a statement, I'm assuming he's still compelled to speak, still says it, and others agree with him. And Matthew leaves it there, doesn't say another word about that. No commentary about what his voice sounded like or what more he might have said or what he really believed. What kind of faith is this? Saving faith? I don't know, but it's faith, and it may be small, but it's there, and you can hear it in his words. And even if it's as small as a mustard seed, you know the potential there, right? And I would think we as people of faith would celebrate faith when we see it. even with such an unlikely candidate to say such an unlikely thing. Here is a Gentile saying this about a Jewish Messiah. Matthew points it out. There's another group there around the cross, not too close, but they're there hanging out. They haven't turned away from Jesus. They didn't flee. They didn't run for their lives. They're not hiding. They're a little ways from the cross, but close enough to be there. And I don't think it would surprise you that it's a group of women. But it would surprise you because they're there and the apostles are gone, except for one. It's surprising. I don't know why they're there, and I don't know why they're a little bit farther away, but still here they are, and they get some credit. Give them some credit for this. Many women were there, watching from a distance, and they had followed Jesus from Galilee to care for his needs. Why is it, do you think, that the spiritual leaders, those handpicked by Jesus himself, the men who were going to carry on the work of the Lord after he was gone, why are they gone? Where did they go? They're absent. For the most part, they're not there, but here are the women, and I love that. Let me say just a little bit, and if you've been around here, you've heard me say some of these. I have been blessed in my life with the influence of some incredible women, grandmothers to start, women of faith, my mother, that I still miss to this day, a mother-in-law, and other mothers who stepped in, who weren't my mom at all, friends' mothers, people who taught me in a small Sunday school class like some of your kids have experienced this morning, and a wife, too. And over the years, they have influenced me and raised me and taught me and mentored me and showed me the grace of Jesus. And I got emotional early. I thought I wouldn't today, that second, but apparently I am. Still raising 3 young ladies in our house. And maybe we all want our kids to be good at sports and good at school, good at all things, but I want them to be spiritual and mature and influence many others. Maybe something like these ladies have done just by staying near the cross. And I have lived long enough to have seen some families and some churches where the men somehow who were called to be spiritual leaders just didn't. They didn't show up. If they did, they didn't stand up. If they did, they didn't influence for good. And I don't know why, but grateful for the ladies who did. Still believe in male spiritual leadership. I believe God has designed it that way for the men to take on that role and to do it well. But I thank God for the women in houses and in homes, in churches and in ministries who have stayed and prayed and stood and served and led when the men were not to be found. By the way, if any of you men do not appreciate the godly women in your life, you have some learning to do. But at the cross, here are the women. And I assume, it doesn't say it, I would assume Jesus, even if they are afar off, is grateful for them too. Just to have been there, to be able to see them. That is medicine for a wounded soul. And it says, Matthew points out, they've been following him for a while, ministering to others, ministering to him as he ministers to others, just by being close. I think women have a God-given, natural talent, a gift to minister, to serve, to love, to care. They love to take care of others, and we should always be grateful, as I am certain Jesus was. But Matthew names some of them, not an anonymous group. He says, and among them, verse 56, Matthew says, among them, Mary Magdalene, Mary, the mother of James and Joseph, and the mother of Zebedee's sons, just to name a few. There's more to say about the ladies. If you'll keep reading, I suspect you all know this, but maybe if you're new, you don't. Just as a preview, let me tell you, these women are big in ministry, and they took care of things, and they were a big part of the early church. But I want you to hear this too. I think you know what comes next, but they're a big part of what comes next, and what comes next will blow your socks off if you can't imagine what comes next. But these women in the early church and the modern church agree that these ladies are worthy because, do you know this? Back to Matthew. Where is Matthew? Do you know when Matthew writes about the cross of Jesus, he has to be doing that from their testimony. Matthew wasn't there. I don't think Matthew heard the words Jesus said on the cross. It's the women who were there. It's the women who are telling the story, has to be, from these writers who weren't even there. So because they were there, faithful, trusted eyewitnesses of the truth, we are here, reading from Matthew about the death of Jesus. We'll stop there. I know it's a short section, but I got a couple observations to make. First, it's amazing how some people come in contact with Jesus and write him off or want to kill him. And others, like a Roman soldier, a centurion, a leader of men, on this day, for whatever reason, steps out of the shadows and makes a bold statement of faith. Amazing. I don't know the rest of his story. I would love to think he becomes a great leader in the church, but it doesn't say that. I know what happens to the ladies. I know what they go on to do, and that's amazing. But what happens to a man or a soldier or some women in some ways doesn't matter much when you look at the cross. It is, what do you have to say about that? What response do you have? You stare at the cross through the words of this apostle, and you look at the man dying in the middle. And if that doesn't touch you or change you or transform you, I'd like to ask, what's going on in you? How can this not affect you? How does it not grow faith? I know not everybody believes, and maybe you don't. But I'd love to see some fear push you to some faith. God doing something right in front of you that makes you want to stand up and say, then this is the work of God, and this is the Son of God. Because Jesus doesn't just want you to stare at this and say, well, that's horrible, that's very sad. He wants this to build faith in you. He wants you to believe. Because if this moment changed a Roman centurion's life, I promise it can change yours. Even those of us who come all the time maybe and say, we all believe. The right says, as we join our voices with the centurion and others in declaring that Jesus was indeed God's Son, so we commit ourselves to living by that faith and to learning every day by looking at the Son more about the love of the Father. So whether you are a believer or not, I wish this would push you to something. Second, it's Luke who points out in this moment that the centurion who says this also says he praises God. And I think that's great. I wonder what that looked like. A Roman soldier with all of his garb on him. What does he do when he praises God? Does he bow his head? Does he lift his hands? Does he raise his eyes to the heavens or beat his breast? Does he become quiet and still, or does he become loud and bold? And I don't know because it doesn't say, but I love it. And it's almost like he doesn't even care what anybody else thinks about him that day. For this one guy on this one hill, looking at this one man in the middle of that middle cross, he can't help himself. He has to state it. He has to say it. He has to declare it. He believes it, and he praises God for it. Some years ago, we were visiting a family in Edmond, Oklahoma, worshiping on that Sunday morning at the Memorial Road Church of Christ. And sitting in the back, when you sit in the back, you guys know this, you get to see everything in front of you, and sometimes it's distracting. And maybe my own girls have distracted you at times. But this little 9-year-old was, I'm guessing 9, he was in front of us, and my family may or may not remember this, but he was singing so loudly. So loudly. You couldn't help but hear him. And most of the time when I sing, people turn around and look at me and wonder what I'm doing. But this kid, he was singing so loud. You just had to stare. And I stared for a little while. This little boy at the top of his lungs was just singing, and he didn't care. And I loved it. And then down a little farther, more in the middle of that place, the assembly, the auditorium, I saw a man I had seen earlier, but I watched him as we were singing this one song. And it looked like he had some physical handicaps, maybe some mental. I don't know him. But I loved watching him sing. It wasn't a show. It was a time of learning for me as I stared for a while. And his fists were doubled up at his side, and he was punching the air as he was singing and swaying his head back and forth with passion, not even caring if you were watching or I was, and I was. And I think maybe I need to be a little bit more like that little boy and like that man and like this Roman soldier, not caring one bit what anybody else might say, just stating it clearly and singing it boldly and believing it without reservation. Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God. And I wish we all had it in us, no matter where we are, where we're from, or what we're doing here today. When you see God working, like in this moment on the cross, and you watch the Son dying, how can you not be moved by that? And I know among us, we tend to be more reserved and quiet. We like things orderly and structured, but I sometimes look at us singing and worshiping, and I think, I don't know if you're asleep or dead, but I wonder, like, do you feel this? Do you get this? Has it moved you or shaped you in any way, or are we just doing church like another Sunday morning? So I hope today you have praised God, and you and God know that. Nobody else needs to know. It is between you and God, but I hope it doesn't stop here, and I hope you carry this on so that every day and every song and every word and by how you act, it will be in praise of the crucified but risen Lord. Because that's worship. That's real worship that's not confined to these walls on a Sunday morning for 1 hour. And then one more thing to close. I need to be more bold. I should be more like this man, this centurion who says it just like that. I want to stand up and declare my faith in Jesus, no matter the consequences. If somebody says, I will laugh or I will kill, it should not matter to me. Tony Perkins, back in 2014, wrote about Habila Aduma, a businessman at his house in Nigeria, and two gunmen, masked gunmen, came to his door and ordered his wife to leave. And they told him they were there to do the work of Allah. And they pointed their AK-47s at him and asked him if he was a Christian. And he said, yes. And they asked him why he had not accepted Islam despite hearing the message of Muhammad. Again, he told them he was a Christian. That's why the gospel is preached, so that they could know the true God. Are you ready to die as a Christian? They said for the second time. And before he could answer, they shot him. They killed him. Just like that. I don't know if this Roman centurion was punished for such a statement, and in some ways it doesn't matter. I've never had a gun to my head. No one's ever threatened me. The worst is maybe giggling, and I'm embarrassed to tell you, I have at times been embarrassed that somebody might giggle by what I might say or do. But I would like to answer like a centurion soldier. I would like to speak up like a Christian martyr. I would like to say and to sing and to do and to worship and to live as if it did not matter what you thought or what they said or what anyone would do to me. And maybe we could leave here today, today. Like an old song says, God give us such a faith as this. God, give us such a faith as this. Let's stand and sing. Come if you need to.
The light of your love.